各位观众朋友，欢迎再回到我们的这个百格会客室。这一次呢，我们就邀请到了詹运豪，就是这个 Director of Asian Institute Tasmania University of Tasmania 的这个 Director 来跟我们谈谈这一次的这一个马来西亚政坛风波，或者是这一次的危机，到底会有一些怎么样的对马来西亚未来会有一些怎么样的这一个影响？首先，我们先欢迎我们今天的嘉宾。Welcome, Professor. Thank you for agreeing to this interview. Actually, today, just today on your Facebook, you have mentioned that your bet is on the horse. Why would you make such a bet?
Sure. I think a lot of people, initially when the crisis started, a lot of people blame Mahathir for the crisis. And after that, the ground started to shift below him. So people thought that maybe UMNO and PAS will have the numbers to form the government. But from day one, I've been very consistent in my assessment that the way it was in Malaysia is that if there's going to be a contest, say between UMNO and Pakatan, UMNO PAS versus Pakatan or third party, it is very likely that Mahathir will come on top. There are many reasons for that, but the primary reasons is that Mahathir is one of the very few politicians in Malaysia who is acceptable to all the communities in Malaysia. But more importantly, people keep forgetting that he's highly experienced. He's got 95 years of political experience. All the other people do not have that sort of experience, and they do not have his sort of political deal-making abilities. So from day one, I've always thought that if there's going to be a crisis, and if people are going to fight for the office of the Prime Minister, it's very likely that he will win.
Okay. You've mentioned that he has the experience, but actually yesterday we see that things are actually not really in favor of Tun. But yesterday, you still think that Tun will come out of this as the victor?
Yes, a lot of journalists actually called me up and asked me whether I have reassessed my position, and I've been very consistent. You have to remember the way the numbers system works in Malaysia is that it's all due to negotiations. As I mentioned earlier in my answer to you, he is the only one who's acceptable to both sides. So when both sides are negotiating, you always go to the middle ground, and he's one of the people standing in the middle ground. So everybody gravitates to him.
Why do you think that Anwar Ibrahim has never been able to achieve that middle ground, which Tun M as what you think that could achieve that middle ground?
Part of the problem with Anwar Ibrahim is that he's always had a significant portion of Malay voters who are against him. So if you look at his career from day one, especially after 1998 when he was removed as the Deputy Prime Minister, he has always had problems with the Malay community. That is the reason why throughout from 1998 until 2018, the opposition coalition, they've gone through many different types of coalition. They were never able to win because they were never able to break into the rural Malay votes. It was only in 2018 when Mahathir came in to charge of the opposition that they were able to win the rural Malay votes. So that was the reason why Pakatan won in 2018. A lot of the credit you have to give to Mahathir. He managed to break through the Malay vote in the rural areas, which allowed them together combine with the opposition urban votes that allowed them to turn into a majority and win the elections.
Okay. You actually predicted that whatever the crisis that we are facing now, as early as November last year, right after the Tanjung PI election. What was the triggering point for you to come to such a prediction?
It was quite clear. I've been monitoring Malaysia for more than 30 years, and what happened was that I've managed to keep in contact with a lot of Malaysian politicians. I'm one of the very few Chinese researchers who keep a very close touch with the Malay community. What I discovered was that starting from the first year of Pakatan in early 2019, I saw a great sense of disappointment across all communities, Chinese, Indian community, and also the Malay community, that Pakatan was simply not delivering on what they promised in terms of change. Part of it has got to do with the fact that Malaysians want instant change. When they got rid of Najib, they thought that the world will immediately change better. For many of them, they thought that the cost of living will go down, the Pakatan will turn on all the subsidies and everything. That didn't happen. They thought that the economy will revive. That didn't happen. So there was a great sense of disappointment. So when we reached the first anniversary, you saw all the negative news coming up. And I remember speaking to a lot of Malay politicians, especially the one in the rural areas. They started talking about something which I've never heard before, which is they're saying that, oh, this government is controlled too much by the Chinese. Then after that, you had the Malay Unity Congress, you had PAS and UMNO coming together. Then I realized that this is actually a very, very important and strong narrative in the Malay community, which is that PAS and UMNO are saying that the Malay agenda and the Islamic agenda are under threat because this government, Pakistan government, was controlled by the DAP. It was so successful that they won 3 by-elections in a row, and that created a panic among the Malay portion of Pakatan Harapan. Then when I was speaking to them, they were saying that we can't go on like this. We really need to find a new model. We need to find a model that tells the Malay community that your special rights or your privileged position are not under threat. That Pakatan is actually a Malay government or Malay majority dominant government. So they were looking for a new model. Once they were talking about new model, I realized that the Malay establishment were also pushing this. I think a lot of people in Malaysia do not understand that there are actually 2 or 3 very important groups in the Malay community. One of them is the Malay establishment. These are the people who tend to be very well established, either in the civil service, retired civil service, or very rich Malay businessmen. They may or may not be members of UMNO Pakatan, but they have always been very influential. They are what we call the thought leaders in the Malay community. They were really worried that the Malay majority in this country were not only unhappy in Pakatan, but there was this sense that they're losing control of the situation. I think very often Chinese politicians don't see this or they don't feel this because most of the time they represent an urban area. In the rural areas, the situation is very, very different. I'll give you a very simple example. In the rural area, the government touch your lives in a much more intimate ways compared to the urban areas. So, for example, in the urban areas, right, for the typical Chinese family, they will try to avoid the government as much as possible. If possible, they will only deal with the government at the official level, which is, when your child is born, you go and collect your birth registration, and then you go and get your IEC, get your passport. But the rest of the time, you try to stay away from the government. You try to run your own business. You try to stay away from local government. You try to stay away from, enforcement, all those things. But if you are living as a Malay person in rural areas, the government is with you all the time. You got the JKK, the security committee in the village, where you have to attend a meeting maybe once a month. You get your fertilizer subsidy from the government. Your children goes to government school, and when children are old enough, you need the YB to support you to write letters to get the UITM or whatever it is. So the relationship between you and the government are completely different. So if there's this narrative coming through that this government is actually not your government, you suddenly feel very afraid. So this is something I think Chinese politicians were aware of, but they didn't take it seriously. Okay. So this is the start of what we're facing, that the pressure from the ground up was so strong that everybody is trying to run around to find a new model.
Okay, you mentioned that the way of living of the rural Malays are very much connected to their government. So do you think that the Pakatan Harapan government, since they take on power, they have not done enough for the rural Malay? And are there anyone else that actually portrayed DAP or the Chinese politician as a opponent to their rights or to whatever that that is actually undermining their way of living for the past?
No, if you look at the pact created by UMNO and PAS, they said it very clearly. We stand for Ketuhanan Melayu, Ketuhanan Islam.
Yes.
I mean, that was what it's all about. So the narrative is there right in front of you. It's just that the typical Chinese person, anything to do with the Malay community, they just ignore it. Just watch, just watch it. They don't look at it carefully. What they don't realize is that it is not the Chinese who decide the political future of this country. If you look at the distribution of seats, the government can only win if you win the rural Malay seats plus East Malaysia. So there is no way the Chinese can win the seats. So even if all the Chinese seats fell to the opposition like they did with the DAP in the last election, it's still not even enough. not even half of what you need to create a majority in parliament. So sometimes, very often, we Chinese live in our own little bubble, and we forget that in the real world, things are very, very different.
Okay. You keep. I mean, you actually in your writing you talk about narrative, right? You also say that in this political crisis, whoever comes out as a victor will actually define the narrative for Malaysia for years to come. I don't know how far reaching it is gonna be, but what is your take? Like if Mahathir really survive this political crisis and become our prime minister again, what do you think? What will be the narrative be for Malaysia as in a whole?
Mahathir's narrative is actually very simple. From day one, if you really want to understand Mahathir, it's actually quite simple. You only have to read the book he wrote in 1970, The Malay Dilemma. He has been very consistent. If you look at all the interviews he's done since he retired, his view has not changed at all, even when he was prime minister. So he has always wanted to modernize the Malays and wanted Malaysia to be a successful, developed country, as sort of a model country, not only in this part of the world, but as a successful country for the rest of the Islamic world. So that has always been his narrative. The other side narrative is much different. If you look at what PAS and UMNO wants, well, not UMNO, but PAS has been very consistent that in their narrative that everything that has gone wrong in Malaysia is because Malaysia is not an Islamic state. They've always been very clear about it. I don't understand why we in the Chinese community don't see that. When you talk about the past of the Chinese community, right, they always think about chopping hands, hoodoo, all those things. That is just a very minor part of what PAS is about. If you read PAS official ideology, right, it's much more comprehensive. They have a plan to set up a full Islamic state. Not just the judiciary part, which is the Sharia part. They actually have a plan to Islamize the entire state and society as well. So we're talking about two very distinct narratives. Mahathir's version of a modernized, modern Malaysia, and PAS and UMNO's view that this is Tanah Melayu, and that we must have a very strong Islamic feature in that narrative.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the impact of this political crisis. Do you think that Malaysia, or whatever, whoever that is leading this government after this political crisis is going to be more moving towards a more conservative way or a more Malay-leaning orientation in their policy making?
No, if you look carefully at Pakistan's policy, they actually allocated more money for so-called Malay agenda issues.
Yes.
What I'm saying is public perception. So when UMNO and PAS get together and tell the rest of the Malay community, this is a government run by the Chinese, in politics, it's nothing to do with reality. It's what the people actually believe. So I'm talking about perception.
Okay.
So it's not a question of whether it's real or not. But what will happen is that if the new government is to be formed over the next 48 hours, if Mahathir will come back, this government will appear to be more Malay dominated. I mean, you can already see in the Malay blogs, they're saying that we must block Pakatan Harapan 2.0 because it's Chinese dominated. They've already started the narrative. Okay. So the government will have to deal with this. One of the things that really concerned me is that before the election 2018, as a journalist, you saw this as well, which is that in terms of social media, the DAP was number one. Yes. They were all over the place. They basically controlled the social media narrative. And yet after the election, they just completely fell apart. So they knew that there was a lot of negative about the performance of DAP, all this of the government and PH government in general. But somehow the DAP social media machinery just disappeared. They were not able to fight back. So the question is, why didn't the DAP do anything about it?
Yes. I think that if you go onto Twitter, you would have noticed that's very apparent different compared to how it was before the election. So I think this time round during the political crisis, right, we see it has happened time and again where the East Malaysia political party has this position as a kingmaker. Do you have any comment on this?
That is actually the wrong word to use. The East Malaysians are not the kingmakers. Sabah and Sarawak collectively is just under 60 seats. Yes. So they're not in a position to be kingmakers, but what they will have is that they will help you get a strong majority. The the reason why they can never be kingmakers at the present moment, especially because they're not united as a bloc.
Yes.
So you can see that GPS has 19 seats, the opposition has about 11, 12 seats. So it is not a solid bloc. The other thing is that the East Malaysians are very different from Malaya in the sense that if you look at the past history, the East Malaysian parties over there basically are not driven by ideology. So generally speaking, they will always try to go whoever they think is going to be the winner. So if Mahathir is going to be the winner, I can guarantee you they all rush to Mahathir. That's the reason why 24 hours earlier they all rushed to Muhyiddin because they thought that he was the winner. So when you talk about East Malaysia, I think you shouldn't give too much credit to the politicians over there. They are much more realistic about what they want, and they want to go the winners because it's all about bringing in more development funds to Sabah and Sarawak.
Do you think that they will be able to negotiate something better for the for Sabah or Sarawak in terms of whatever they have been fighting for, the oil royalty or the rights of the Sabah and Sarawak under the Malaysia Agreement after this round of political crisis?
Right. So what will happen is that once the crisis is over, obviously they will need a period where everything has to calm down. I think the thing that will preoccupy the federal government is not so much the Malaysia Agreement, East Malaysia, is the economy. The whole of this week, right, people don't realize billions of dollars have left Malaysia. If you just look at the stock market, not millions, billions of dollars, US dollars.
Yes, that's right.
and you know, the typical person in the streets don't understand the significance of this. I'll just give you a very simple significance. It will affect everybody in the street because the moment your stock market collapse, right, the next thing that will collapse is your ringgit. If the ringgit collapse, right, you can imagine basically in a typical household in the urban areas, right, I would say about half of the basket of goods are actually imported goods. So, for young people, it's very simple. You can forget about going to Starbucks after this. Anyway, that's a joke. All I'm saying that this is a very dangerous game they're playing. People think, it's politicians running here, running there, all this. It has real world implications if the economy collapse. So I think the first priority for the government is really to deal with the falling economy. Secondly, we've got this virus issue, also a very, very serious issue because it's a major impact on the tourism sector.
Yes.
So I think the East Malaysian thing, of course, is important, but I'm just saying that in the short term, it will not be the priority of whoever is coming in the government.
Okay, all right. Now, I think let's touch on the unity government, which Mahathir had proposed to put on the has put on the table actually, and perhaps he's going to implement it. I'm not so sure. I don't know what's your take on that. So, what do you think about the unity government, and how do you think it's going to impact Malaysia?
There's no need to answer that question. That's off the table already. Mahathir has dropped the idea completely.
You think
So
it has
if
been dropped?
Mahathir wins, it'll be a Pakatan Harapan 2.0, and there's no thought of unity government on his side anymore.
Okay, then maybe can we actually talk about how can we avoid another political crisis like this? Is there any systemic reform that we can actually deal with it? Because now, as it seems, a lot of little people like us are feeling very hopeless because everything is in the political elite's hands. What should we do, or as Malaysian, to moving on?
Okay. If you want me to be very honest, the answer is
Yeah, of course, a very honest answer.
Politics in this part of the world, and I'm talking about Southeast Asia, right?
Yes.
The orang kecil, the small people does not matter. So it takes, this is part of what we call a political culture. The political culture of this part of the world is based on the orang besar, the big man approach. So there's really nothing the person in the street can do. I just want to tell your listeners one piece of good news because I think I sound very negative. The piece of good news is that all this political crisis in the long term is actually good for Malaysia. The reason is because one of the very, very important things that Malaysians always forget about May 2018 is that you had a regime change or government change without violence.
Yes.
Because if you remember, right, before May 2018, right, everybody says that, be careful. If Barisan loses, there'll be rioting on the street. We will have May 1369, all that sort of thing. And none of those things happen. So government change and regime change is actually a good thing. So this current crisis, I would say, is a positive in the long run because it shows that the political class in Malaysia can actually work in terms of regime change without violence. And this is a good thing. And I'm comparing this, say, to other countries in the region. I can guarantee you, if these things were happening in Thailand or the Philippines, right? Somebody who have been shot, there'll be some rioting in the streets. So I think all this political upheaval in Malaysia is good in the long term. Most of you will not believe me, but maybe 10 years from now you will believe me.
Okay, all right. I think, Prof, I think this is a very good note to end our discussion today. Thank you so much for coming up and agreeing to take on this interview. We will continue to follow up with the latest development, and maybe we can hear more from you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
各位观众朋友听过了刚才这个詹玉豪博士的分析，我觉得我们现在对这个现在发生的这个政治风波可能会有更明确的一个看法。不过先给大家预告一下，因为皇宫就是国家皇宫已经发出了一个就是通告，这是今天下午5点呢，他们会就是等一下还有半个小时，皇宫会发出一个文告，到时候我们会为您跟进。我们到时见，谢谢。